Hi, I'm a senior planner from Huon Valley Council, here to give you a practical example of how a council planner assesses a development application. This is for guidance only, as planning is a complex thing, and it should be used to assist you in thinking about how zoning changes under the new Tasmanian Planning Scheme may affect the development potential of your land. We also recommend viewing our last video first. This covered how the land is zoned under the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, which is very important information to understand before considering how a development application will be assessed. The assessment of a permit application considers the permitted and discretionary land uses within the zone and an assessment against the guidelines within that zone, as well as any applicable codes or overlays. The difference between a zone and a code is that all land has a zone and some land has codes. Codes can be biodiversity code, flood-prone areas code, landslide hazard code, waterway and coastal protection area code. In simple terms, the development outcomes on two identically zoned properties can be very different based on their unique characteristics, which can often be affected by codes. For example, if you take two properties that are now currently zoned rural resource under the interim planning scheme, one is a bush block and one is predominantly pasture. Now, the pasture block will have far more permitted uses as is because it has already been developed and used from its natural state into grazing land. The bush block, however, due to bushfire management and biodiversity protection overlays, will most likely require a discretionary application for any development. That doesn't mean development is not possible, it just means more things need to be considered. As we move to the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, these two same rural properties have now been zoned differently. The pasture block is now zoned rural, and the bush block has moved to landscape protection zone. Now, as you can imagine, landscape conservation zone is all about respecting the landscape values of the property whilst still allowing some development, whereas the rural zoned block will still allow for rural uses and development given it already is used for rural purposes. For both properties, a range of development is still possible, and the assessment, whether it is permitted or discretionary, will generally remain the same because of the specific characteristics of the property, such as landslip, flooding, biodiversity. So any specific characteristics of a site will influence how council assesses it under the new zone. The codes and the characteristics of the block don't change. The zone is the only thing that changes, but it's a name basically, and the same uses are generally either permitted or discretionary. So what can you do now? We recommend viewing the Huon Valley planning page and following the steps in the flowchart. You'll find links to the zoning maps and guidelines and the new and the old planning schemes, where you can do a head-to-head comparison of the criteria of the different zones. The interim zone, which we currently have, and the new zone, which is proposed under the Tasmanian Planning Scheme. From the examples provided, you now understand it is important to consider if the type of development you are interested in would be permitted or discretionary on your land to truly understand the impact that the zone change will have on your property. If you believe the new zone that's been applied does not match the characteristics of your property or will limit your use and development options relative to the new planning scheme, you have until the 30th of April to make a representation. And we encourage you to seek professional planning support for your representation. A representation is when you put something in writing which explains why you think the zone should be changed and what it should be changed to, and evidence stating why that is the case. We hope you found this video useful. Please visit our website for other content related to the transition to the new planning scheme. Thanks for your time and your interest.